My sister fired me the moment she took the CEO chair. Your services are no longer required, it's business, she said, without looking at me. Clear your office by tomorrow, my little poor sister. I nodded. I smiled. She thought she'd won. The next morning, she learned the difference. I remember the weight of the bronze nameplate in my hand. Director of Operations. 8 years of service, distilled into metal, and 2 lines of engraving. I'd already packed it, along with the photos, the awards, the coffee mug Dad gave me on my first day. The office was nearly empty by the time she walked in. She didn't knock. I wanted to make sure you were actually leaving, Lauren said, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. She wore the navy suit, the one Mom bought her for interviews back when neither of us could afford dry cleaning. It fit differently now, or maybe she wore it differently. I looked up from the box on my desk. I said I would. You also said you'd support my vision for the company. Her voice was flat, corporate. The voice she used in board meetings, not the one she used to use when we'd stay up late planning the future of Dad's business. But I've seen the Slack messages, Claire. I know you've been undermining me. I placed the nameplate in the box, nestled between a stapler and a framed certificate for workplace excellence. I asked questions about the restructuring timeline. That's not undermining, that's due diligence. It's insubordination. She stepped into the office, my office, though I suppose it wasn't anymore. And it ends today. Your services are no longer required. It's business. I nodded slowly. The finality in her voice left no room for negotiation, no space for the 1,000 conversations we'd had over the years about loyalty, about family, about what Dad would have wanted. Those conversations belonged to a different version of us. I understand, I said. She almost looked disappointed, as if she'd been expecting me to fight, to cry, to beg. Instead, I folded the flaps of the cardboard box and ran a strip of packing tape across the top. The sound was loud in the quiet office. Clear everything by tomorrow, she added, though there was nothing left to clear. And Claire, she paused at the door, her hand on the frame. You were always so good at the details, the execution, but you never understood vision, you never understood what it takes to lead. She smiled then, small, satisfied, the smile of someone who believes they've won something important. Goodbye, Lauren, I said. She left without another word. I heard her heels clicking down the hallway, heard her stop to talk to someone, probably Marcus from finance, who'd been congratulating her all week on tough but necessary decisions. I heard her laugh, light and easy, the sound carrying back to where I stood alone in the empty office. I picked up the box. It wasn't heavy. 8 years, and it all fit in 2 cubic feet of cardboard. Security guard Danny held the door for me on my way out. He'd been with the company since before I was born, back when it was just Dad and 3 employees working out of a garage. Miss Claire, he said quietly, I'm real sorry about this. Thank you, Danny. Your father, he stopped, shook his head. Well, you take care of yourself. I nodded and stepped out into the October afternoon. The air was sharp, clean, the kind of cold that makes you pay attention. I put the box in my trunk, closed it carefully, and sat in my car for a long time before I started the engine. I didn't cry. That would come later, in private, in the shower where no one could hear. For now, I just felt empty, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside and removed something essential, leaving only the shape of where it used to be. I drove home. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at nothing until the light changed and the room grew dark around me. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend. Simone, I heard. I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come over? I typed back. Tomorrow, maybe. Tonight, I just need to sit with it. She sent back a heart. I set the phone down and kept sitting. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates. Small moments that don't seem significant until you line them up and see the pattern. Lauren had been pulling away for months, since Dad's funeral, really, since the reading of the will. I'd expected it, in a way. She was his firstborn, his golden child, confident, charismatic, the one who could walk into a room and make people believe in anything she said. I was the quiet one, the one who made things work behind the scenes. We'd always been different, but it had never mattered before. We'd been a team. The will had made her CEO. That was fine, expected even. I was named Director of Operations, with a seat on the board and a clear succession path. Dad had structured it carefully, making sure we'd both have roles, both have security, both have a stake in the company he'd built. What I hadn't expected was how quickly she'd start erasing me. First, it was small things. My name left off email chains. My input requested but not acknowledged in meetings. Strategic decisions made without my consultation despite my role. Then came the restructuring proposal, a complete overhaul of the operational framework I'd spent years developing. She presented it to the board without warning, calling it modernization. I'd ask questions, not to undermine her, but because the proposal had gaps. Timeline issues, budget concerns, implementation risks that hadn't been addressed. I'd put them in writing, sent them through proper channels, kept everything professional. Apparently, that had been my mistake. In Lauren's company, because that's what it was now, her company, questions were insubordination, caution was resistance, and family loyalty ran exactly as deep as the org chart allowed. I sat in the dark and thought about the last conversation I'd had with Dad, 3 weeks before he died, when he still had good days mixed in with the bad ones. We'd been in his study, the one with the big windows overlooking the garden Mom had planted. "You and your sister," he'd said, his voice thin but steady. "You balance each other. She's the vision, you're the foundation. Don't forget that. Don't let her forget that." I'd promised him I wouldn't, but some promises are impossible to keep. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls. I blinked at my phone, confused. It was barely 6 a.m. The calls had started at 5:47, all from the same number, the company's main line. Before I could process this, my phone rang again. I answered. "Claire." It was Marcus, and he sounded rattled. "Thank God, we need you to come in immediately." "Marcus, I don't work there anymore." I know, but we have a situation, a serious situation. Lauren's been trying to access the operational systems, and everything's locked. We can't process payroll. We can't access client accounts. The entire back end is frozen." I sat up slowly. "What do you mean frozen?" "I mean nothing works. Every system that touches operations, finance, HR, client management, logistics, everything, it's all requiring administrative override. And none of the credentials are working. We've been locked out of our own company." I said nothing. "Claire, please. We have payroll due today. We have client deliverables due. We have contracts that will breach if we can't access the systems. Lauren is..." He lowered his voice. "She's panicking. She needs your help." "Where is she?" "Conference room A. The whole executive team is here." I looked at the clock. "I'll be there in an hour." Thank you. I'll tell..." I hung up. I made coffee. I showered. I dressed carefully, professionally. Black suit, simple jewelry, hair pulled back. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the expression on my face. Calm, neutral, empty. I wasn't smiling. The drive to the office was familiar, automatic. I'd made this drive 1,000 times, but today, something was different. Today, I wasn't going as an employee. I wasn't going as family. Today, I was going to teach my sister the difference. The executive conference room was chaos. 6 people clustered around the table, all talking over each other. Laptops open, phones pressed to ears, the sharp smell of stress and too much coffee. Lauren stood at the head of the table, her face pale, her perfect composure cracked down the middle. The room went quiet when I walked in. "Claire," Lauren's voice was carefully controlled. "Thank you for coming." I set my bag down and looked around the table. Marcus, Janet from H, David from Client Services, Tom from Logistics, Rebecca from IT, all of them staring at me with expressions that ranged from desperate to calculating. "Explain the problem," I said. Rebecca jumped in. "Every operational system is locked behind administrative credentials that we don't have. We've tried every password, every override, every backup access point. Nothing works. It's like the entire infrastructure has been sealed. Who has administrative access to operational systems?" "You do," Rebecca said quietly. "You're the only one listed in the system as having full operational admin rights." I nodded slowly. "And when you say operational systems, you mean..." "Everything," Marcus said. "Payroll, benefits, client databases, project management, vendor accounts, supply chain tracking, the whole integrated operational framework. The framework I'd built. The one I'd designed, implemented, and maintained over 8 years. The one that touched every single aspect of how the company functioned." Lauren found her voice. "We need your credentials, Claire." "I was fired yesterday," I said mildly. My access should have been revoked. It was, Rebecca said. We followed standard offboarding protocol, but the systems are still locked to your administrative profile. They require a deliberate credential transfer that apparently didn't happen. Everyone looked at me. I pulled out a chair and sat down. When I built the operational framework, I implemented multiple security layers. It's designed to prevent exactly what's happening now: unauthorized access to critical systems during transitions. The credentials can't be brute forced or bypassed. They have to be transferred through a deliberate, documented process. So transfer them, Lauren said. Her voice had an edge now. To whom? The question hung in the air. To me, Lauren said. Obviously. I tilted my head slightly. Do you know how the operational framework works? That's not relevant. It's extremely relevant. The framework isn't just passwords, Lauren. It's a complex, integrated system that requires deep operational knowledge to manage safely. Transfer credentials to someone who doesn't understand the architecture, and you risk breaking everything. Then explain it, she said through her teeth. That would take months, maybe years. I built that system over 8 years, remember? It touches 47 different platforms, manages 17 separate vendor relationships, coordinates 4 departments, and processes approximately $16 million in transactions monthly. There are interdependencies, fail-safes, and protocols that aren't documented anywhere but in my head. The room was very quiet. Are you saying, Janet said carefully, that you're the only person who can operate the company? I'm saying that operational leadership isn't decorative. It's essential, and it can't be replaced overnight. Lauren's hands were flat on the table. What do you want, Claire? Excuse me? Don't play games. You clearly planned this. You locked us out deliberately. So what do you want? Money? Your job back? What? I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't lock you out, Lauren. I built a secure system that requires proper transition procedures. Those procedures weren't followed because you fired me with 24 hours notice and no transition plan. So this is revenge. This is consequence. I stood up. You made a business decision yesterday. You decided that my services were no longer required. That was your right as CEO, but business decisions have business implications. You can't fire your operational infrastructure and expect it to keep running. You're holding the company hostage. I'm holding nothing. I don't work here anymore, remember? You made that very clear. I picked up my bag. But I'll give you some free advice. As family, you need to hire an operational director immediately, someone with serious experience. And you need to budget 6 to 9 months for transition and training. It can be done. It'll just take time, money, and humility. We don't have 6 months, Marcus said desperately. We have client deliverables due this week. We have payroll due today. Then you have a problem. I walked toward the door. Claire, Lauren's voice was sharp. You can't just walk away from this. I turned back. Yes, I can. You fired me, remember? Or was that not a real business decision? Was it just theater? Her face flushed. I'm still your sister. Yes, I said softly. You are. And yesterday you looked me in the eye and told me my services weren't required, that it was just business. So let's keep it business. You want my help? Make me an offer. An offer. A business offer, with terms, compensation, and a contract. You're the CEO. I'm sure you know how that works. I left before she could respond. My phone started ringing before I reached my car. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. I drove to a coffee shop across town, ordered a latte, and sat by the window. The phone kept ringing. Lauren, Marcus, Janet, numbers I didn't recognize. I turned off the ringer and watched the city move past the window. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I'd expected to feel something: rage, satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I just felt quiet, clear, like I'd finally stopped carrying something heavy, and my spine was remembering how to be straight. Simone found me an hour later. I'd texted her the address. You're terrifying, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Do you know that? I haven't done anything? Exactly, that's the terrifying part. She studied my face. How are you really? I'm fine. Claire, I looked at her. Simone had been my friend since college. She knew me before the company, before Dad got sick, before everything became complicated. She knew the version of me that existed separately from all of this. I think I'm relieved, I said slowly. Is that wrong? Why would it be wrong? Because the company is in trouble, real trouble, people's livelihoods are at stake, and I'm sitting here drinking coffee. You didn't create this trouble, Lauren did. I could fix it. You could, should, you? That was the question, wasn't it? My phone buzzed. Another call. I glanced at the screen. Mom. I answered. Hi, Mom. Claire, her voice was tight. Lauren called me. She said you're sabotaging the company. I closed my eyes. That's not what's happening. Then what is happening? She said payroll can't be processed. She said clients are at risk. She said you walked out of a meeting and refused to help. She fired me yesterday. Did she mention that? Silence. She told me I was no longer needed, that my services weren't required, that it was just business. She gave me 24 hours to clear my office and never looked back. And now there are consequences to that decision, and she wants to blame me. Your sisters, Mom said. This is Dad's company. You can't just… I can't what? Set boundaries? Expect professional treatment? Walk away when I'm told I'm not wanted? You know what I mean. I did know. I knew exactly what she meant. She meant that I was supposed to be the accommodating one, the flexible one, the one who smoothed things over and made it work. Because that's what I'd always been. Mom, I said quietly, what would you tell me to do if this was any other company, any other boss? This isn't any other company. I know, but maybe it should be. Maybe that's the problem. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Lauren needs help, Claire. Lauren has an executive team, a board of directors, and a budget for external consultants. She has resources. What she doesn't have is respect for the work I did or the value I brought. And I can't help someone who doesn't respect me. This will destroy the company. Maybe, or maybe it'll teach her something important. I paused. Dad always said we balanced each other, vision and foundation, but foundations don't work if they're not valued. They just crumble slowly until everything falls. Mom didn't say anything. I have to go, I said. I love you. I hung up before she could respond. Simone reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. I'm not sure there is a right thing here. Then you're doing the true thing. That counts. By evening, I had 43 missed calls and 28 unread emails. I opened one at random. It was from Rebecca in IT. Claire, I know this is complicated, but we're in serious trouble. The payroll failure affects 247 employees. Some of them live paycheck to paycheck. They're counting on us. Please consider coming back, even temporarily. I know Lauren handled this badly. I know you have every right to be angry, but people are going to get hurt if we can't resolve this. I closed my laptop. She was right, of course. There were real people affected by this. Danny, the security guard. Alice in accounting, who was saving for her daughter's college. Jose in logistics, who'd just bought a house. Good people who'd done nothing wrong and didn't deserve to be collateral damage in a family conflict. I thought about what Dad would say. He'd probably tell me to help, to be the bigger person, to put the company first. But Dad was gone, and maybe part of the problem was that I'd spent too long putting the company first and myself last. My phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Claire Donovan? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Yes. My name is Patricia Keene. I'm an executive mediator. I've been hired by Donovan Industries to facilitate a resolution to the current operational crisis. Do you have time to speak? A mediator. Lauren had hired a mediator. I'm listening. I've reviewed the situation with all parties. It's my understanding that you possess critical operational knowledge and administrative access that the company currently needs. It's also my understanding that your employment was recently terminated. Is that accurate? Yes. Ms. Donovan, Lauren Donovan, is prepared to make an offer to resolve the situation. Would you be willing to hear it? I'm willing to hear anything reasonable. Excellent. Can you come to the office tomorrow morning at 9? We'll have all parties present and we can discuss terms. I'll be there. Thank you, Ms. Donovan. I appreciate your professionalism. I hung up and stared at the phone. Simone raised her eyebrows. Mediator? Apparently. They're taking this seriously. They should be. They're dead in the water without operational access. So what are you going to ask for? I hadn't let myself think about it, hadn't let myself imagine what I wanted, because wanting felt dangerous. Wanting meant vulnerability. Wanting meant I could be disappointed. But now, sitting in my quiet apartment with the city lights spreading out below, I let myself consider it. What did I want? Not revenge. Revenge was empty, destructive. It would eat me alive and solve nothing. Not an apology. Words were cheap. Lauren could say sorry and mean nothing by it. What I wanted was simple and impossibly complicated. I wanted to be valued, seen, treated as essential, not disposable. I wanted my work to be respected. I wanted my sister to understand what she'd done. I want a contract, I said, a real one, with terms, protections, and consequences if they violate it. I want my authority defined and defended, and I want her to admit on the record that she made a mistake. Think she'll do it? I don't know, but I'm not helping unless she does. The conference room looked different at 9 a.m. than it had the day before, calmer, more controlled. Patricia Keene sat at the head of the table, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Lauren sat to her right, Marcus to her left. The rest of the executive team was absent. Ms. Donovan, Patricia said, thank you for coming. I sat down across from Lauren. We didn't look at each other. Let's establish the facts, Patricia said. Donovan Industries is currently unable to process payroll or access critical operational systems. This is due to administrative security protocols that require your authorization to override, correct? Correct. And you're willing to provide that authorization under certain conditions? Yes. What conditions? I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a document I'd written the night before. 3 pages, single-spaced. Reinstatement as Director of Operations. Reporting directly to the CEO with a seat on the board. 3-year contract with performance benchmarks and termination protections. Compensation at market rate plus 10%. Full operational authority with clearly defined scope and autonomy. And a written acknowledgement signed by Lauren and the board that my termination was premature and detrimental to the company. Patricia read through it carefully. Lauren didn't touch it. This is reasonable, Patricia said. More than reasonable given the circumstances. It's extortion, Lauren said quietly. It's negotiation, I corrected. You need something I have. I'm stating my terms. You're holding people's livelihoods hostage. You're the one who created this situation. I'm offering to fix it, for a price. Patricia held up a hand. Let's focus on solutions. Ms. Donovan, Lauren, is the company prepared to meet these terms? Lauren finally looked at me. Her face was carefully blank, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was weighing options, running scenarios, trying to find an angle. Some of these terms are acceptable, she said, but I can't agree to the acknowledgement. That's asking me to admit failure in writing. You did fail, I said. You fired a critical operational leader with no transition plan. That was a failure of judgment. I'm asking you to acknowledge it. It would undermine my authority. Your authority is already undermined. You've been CEO for 6 weeks, and the company is paralyzed. Acknowledging a mistake won't weaken you. Refusing to acknowledge it will. Patricia nodded slowly. She's right. Executive leadership includes accountability. If you can't own your decisions, you shouldn't be making them. Lauren's jaw tightened. Fine, I'll sign the acknowledgement, but I want something in return. What? Loyalty, real loyalty. No more questions in meetings, no more pushback on strategic decisions. If you're going to be director of operations, you operate. You don't question. I almost laughed. That's not how this works. My job is to question, to push back when something doesn't make operational sense. That's the whole point of my role. Then we're at an impasse. Are we? I leaned forward. Lauren, do you want a company that functions, or do you want a company where everyone agrees with you? I want both. You can't have both. Good operations require critical thinking, alternative perspectives, and people who aren't afraid to say when something won't work. If you only want yes people around you, you don't need a director of operations. You need a rubber stamp. Patricia was watching us both carefully. It sounds like there's a deeper issue here. Trust. There's no trust, Lauren said. She's proven that. I've proven nothing except that I won't be disposable, I said. You want loyalty? Earn it. Respect my expertise. Value my contributions. Treat me like a colleague, not a subordinate to be tolerated. You're asking me to give up control. I'm asking you to share it, the way Dad intended. The room was quiet. He gave you CEO, I said softly, but he gave me operations, not as a consolation prize, not as a placeholder, as a real role with real authority. Because he knew you needed me. He knew we were better together than apart. Lauren looked away. He's not here anymore. No, he's not, but his wisdom is. And his wisdom was that we balance each other. Vision and foundation, I paused. You've been trying to do everything yourself, and it's not working. Let me help. Really help. Not as your little sister, as your partner. Patricia made a note. I think that's a good place to draft terms. Lauren, can you accept operational autonomy within Claire's defined scope? A long pause. Yes, Lauren finally said, as long as strategic decisions remain mine. They do, I said. I don't want to be CEO. I never did. I just want to do my job well, without being second-guessed or undermined. Then we have an agreement in principle, Patricia said. I'll draft a formal contract incorporating these terms. You'll both review and sign. And then, Claire, you'll restore operational access. Immediately, Patricia stood. I'll have the contract ready by this afternoon. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you two talk. Really talk. Because a contract can define roles, but it can't rebuild trust. That's on you. She left. Lauren and I sat alone in the conference room. I didn't know, Lauren said finally, that it would be like this. Like what? Hard, lonely, scary. She rubbed her face. Everyone's watching me, waiting for me to fail. I thought being CEO meant having all the answers, but I don't. And I didn't know how to admit that without looking weak. I said nothing. When I fired you, she continued, it wasn't because I thought you were bad at your job. It was because you kept asking questions I couldn't answer. Every time you pushed back, it felt like you were exposing me, showing everyone that I didn't know what I was doing. So you eliminated the questions. Yes, that's not leadership, Lauren. That's insecurity. She flinched. I know that now. But in the moment, she trailed off. I wanted to prove I could do this alone, that I didn't need you. Why? Because I've always needed you. Her voice cracked. My whole life, you've been the one who made things work, who fixed my mistakes, who covered for me when I screwed up, and I thought maybe if I could do this without you, I'd finally be good enough on my own. Something in my chest loosened. You were always good enough, I said quietly. But being good enough doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means knowing when to lean on people who fill in your gaps. I'm sorry. She looked at me finally, and her eyes were red. I'm so sorry, Claire, for firing you, for humiliating you, for treating you like you were disposable when you've been holding this whole company together. I nodded slowly. Thank you. Is that enough? The apology? It's a start. I stood up. But Lauren, I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back to save you. I'm coming back because I love this company, and I'm good at what I do. But I won't be taken for granted again. The contract isn't negotiable. My boundaries aren't negotiable. If you violate them, I'm gone. No second chances. I understand. Do you? Because yesterday you called me your little poor sister. You smiled when you fired me. You looked satisfied. She closed her eyes. I was performing, trying to look strong. You looked cruel. I know. We stood there, two sisters in an empty conference room, with years of complicated history between us and an uncertain future ahead. Can we fix this? Lauren asked. I don't know, but we can try. I restored operational access at 3 p.m. The process took 14 minutes. I logged into the administrative backend, transferred credentials through the secure protocol I'd built, updated access hierarchies, and verified system functionality. By 3:14, payroll was processing. Client systems were accessible. The company was breathing again. I did it from my kitchen table. Rebecca called to confirm everything was working. I walked her through the administrative interface, showed her where the documentation was stored, explained the backup protocols. She took notes furiously. This is incredibly complex, she said. Yes. It's going to take months to fully understand. Yes. Thank you for building it and for coming back. I hung up and stared at my laptop. The framework I'd created filled the screen. Layers of code, interconnected systems, years of careful architecture. It was beautiful in its way, efficient, resilient, built to last. I'd built it to serve the company, but I'd also built it to serve myself, to prove my value, to make myself indispensable. Maybe that had been my mistake. Tying my worth to my usefulness, making myself so essential that losing me would break everything. Or maybe that had been my power. The contract arrived by email an hour later. I read through it carefully. Everything I'd asked for was there: title, compensation, authority, protections. And at the end, a signed statement from Lauren and the board. The board acknowledges that the termination of Claire Donovan as Director of Operations was premature and not in the best interest of the company. We recognize her essential contributions to operational excellence and are pleased to welcome her back in her role. It wasn't a full apology. It was corporate language, careful and sanitized. But it was acknowledgement, on the record, permanent. I signed the contract and sent it back. My first day back was quiet. I arrived early before most people were in. My old office was still empty. They hadn't had time to reassign it. Someone had left the box of my belongings by the door. I unpacked slowly, putting things back where they'd been. The nameplate, the photos, Dad's coffee mug. Danny stopped by around 8. "Welcome back, Ms. Claire." "Thanks, Danny. For what it's worth, we missed you. It's only been 3 days. Longest 3 days this company's ever had." I smiled. "Let's not do it again." Agreed. People trickled by throughout the morning. Some congratulated me. Some avoided eye contact. A few asked quiet questions about what had happened, what it meant, whether things would go back to normal. Didn't know how to answer that last one. Normal had broken. We were building something new now, something undefined. Whether it would be better or worse remained to be seen. Lauren came by at 10. She stood in my doorway, uncertain in a way I'd never seen her before. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Sure." She came in and closed the door. "I wanted to check in, make sure we're okay." "Define okay." "I mean," she hesitated. "Are we going to be able to work together?" "I think so, but it'll take time." "How much time?" "I don't know. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." She nodded. "I'm going to try, to be better, to listen more, to not—" She trailed off. "To not fire me on a whim?" A small pained smile. "Yeah, that." "Good plan." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Claire, thank you for coming back." "I know you didn't have to." "I know." After she left, I sat at my desk and looked out the window. The view was the same as it had always been. The city spread out below, endless and complicated and alive. But something had shifted, some fundamental rebalancing of power and perspective. I'd learned something in those 3 days, something about boundaries and value and the difference between being needed and being respected. I'd learned that walking away was possible, that I could survive without this place, without this role, without my sister's approval. And somehow, that made staying a choice instead of a necessity. My phone buzzed. A text from Simone. "How's the first day back?" I typed. "Different, but maybe good different." She sent back a champagne emoji. I smiled and got to work. The weeks that followed were strange, tentative, like learning to walk again after an injury. Lauren and I communicated carefully, professionally. She consulted me on operational impacts before making strategic decisions. I gave her honest feedback without softening the edges. We argued sometimes, real arguments about budgets and timelines and resource allocation, but they were productive arguments, the kind that ended with better decisions instead of hurt feelings. The executive team adjusted. Some people seemed relieved to have me back. Others were wary, watching to see if I'd become vindictive or if Lauren would resent my return. We had to prove, day by day, that we could function as partners. It wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal cleanly. There were moments when I'd catch Lauren looking at me with uncertainty, as if wondering when I'd leave again. There were moments when I'd feel my defenses rise, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But there were also moments of surprising collaboration, times when we'd build on each other's ideas and create something neither of us could have made alone. Times when I'd see a flash of the sister I'd grown up with, the one who'd stayed up late with me planning impossible dreams. Those moments didn't erase what had happened. but they hinted at what might be possible. 1 month after my return, the board met to review quarterly results. The operational restructuring Lauren had proposed, the one that had started all of this, came up for discussion. She presented the framework, explained the vision. It was good, genuinely innovative. But there were still gaps, the same ones I'd flagged months ago. The board looked to me. Operations perspective? I could have been diplomatic, supportive. I could have let it pass and dealt with the problems privately. Instead, I was honest. The vision is strong, I said, but the implementation timeline is unrealistic given current resource constraints. We need either more time or more budget, preferably both. Lauren tensed. For a moment, I thought she might push back, might defend her proposal reflexively. Instead, she nodded. Claire's right, I was optimistic about the timeline. What would you recommend? I pulled up a revised projection. Extend implementation to 18 months instead of 12. Increase operational budget by 20%. Bring in 2 additional project managers. That gives us room for contingencies and doesn't burn out the existing team. The board discussed it, voted, approved the revision. After the meeting, Lauren found me in the hallway. Thank you for not letting me run off a cliff. That's I know, but it's also… She paused. It's what sisters do. Keep each other from doing stupid things. Usually when they're listening. I'm listening now. I know. She smiled, small, genuine. We're getting better at this. Slowly. Still counts. 3 months after my return, Mom hosted Sunday dinner, the first one since everything had happened. I almost didn't go. The thought of sitting across from Lauren at a family table, pretending everything was fine, felt exhausting. But Mom had asked specifically, had said it was important, so I went. Lauren was already there when I arrived, helping Mom set the table. She looked up when I came in, and something complicated passed across her face. Relief, maybe, or anxiety. Claire, Mom said, pulling me into a hug. I'm so glad you came. We sat down to eat. Mom made all of Dad's favorites: pot roast, roasted vegetables, homemade rolls. The table felt empty without him, the absence louder than any conversation. How's the company? Mom asked. Good, Lauren said. The restructuring is on track. Operations are solid. We just landed a major new client. That's wonderful. Claire made it possible, Lauren added. She rebuilt the entire client onboarding process, cut timeline in half. Mom looked at me. That's impressive. I shrugged. It needed updating. We ate in silence for a while. I owe you both an apology, Mom said suddenly. Lauren and I looked up. When this all happened, Mom continued, I told Claire to just fix it, to help regardless of how she'd been treated. I prioritized the company over her well-being. That wasn't fair. Mom, Lauren started. Let me finish. Mom's voice was firm. Your father built that company, and I love it, but it's not more important than you two, either of you, and I should have said that from the beginning. Claire, you had every right to walk away, every right to demand better treatment. I'm sorry I didn't support that. My throat tightened. Thank you. And Lauren, you made a serious mistake. Firing your sister without a transition plan, without respect for her contributions, that was wrong. I'm proud that you acknowledged it, but I need you to understand that relationships aren't expendable, not even in business. Lauren nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? Mom looked between us. Because you two are all you have left. Your father is gone. I won't be here forever. At some point, it'll just be the two of you. Make sure that means something. The rest of dinner was quieter. We talked about small things. Weather, neighbors, a movie Mom wanted to see. Normal, unremarkable conversation. The kind of conversation that only happens when the big things have been said. As I was leaving, Lauren walked me to my car. She's right, you know, Lauren said. Mom, about relationships mattering. I know. I don't want to lose you as a sister, as a colleague, as… She searched for words. As someone who knows me, really knows me. You won't lose me, but you also can't take me for granted. I know, I'm trying not to. I unlocked my car. Try harder. She laughed, surprised, genuine. Okay, I will. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in months, hopeful. 6 months after my return, I sat in my office and reviewed the operational metrics. Everything was green, efficiency up, costs down. Employee satisfaction improved. The systems were humming. Lauren knocked and came in without waiting. We'd gotten comfortable with each other again, the easy familiarity of people who'd spent their whole lives in proximity. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Sure." She sat down. "I've been thinking about succession planning." I raised an eyebrow. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" "No, but I should have thought about this before. Dad had a plan for us. I don't have a plan for anyone else, and that's a problem." "Okay." "I want to develop a formal operational leadership pipeline. Train people in the systems you built. Make sure that if something happens to you, or if you decide to leave, the company doesn't collapse." It was the smart thing to do, the responsible thing. And yet some part of me resisted, the part that still equated my value with my indispensability. "That makes sense," I said carefully. "I need your help to build it, a real training program, documentation, redundancy. You're asking me to make myself replaceable. I'm asking you to make the company sustainable. There's a difference." I thought about that, about the difference between being needed and being valuable, about building something that could outlast me, that could serve people beyond my tenure. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." We spent the next hour sketching out a plan, identifying key roles, defining knowledge areas, structuring a development program. It was good work, important work. As Lauren was leaving, she paused. "This won't make you less valuable, you know. It'll make you more valuable, because you'll be building leaders, not just systems." After she left, I sat with that thought. Maybe she was right. Maybe the ultimate value wasn't in being irreplaceable. It was in multiplying yourself, in creating a legacy that extended beyond your own contributions. Dad would have liked that idea. 1 year after my firing, I stood in front of the company at the annual all-hands meeting. Lauren had asked me to speak about operational excellence, about the year's achievements, the challenges overcome, the path forward. I looked out at 250 faces, employees I'd worked with for years, new hires who'd joined since my return, people whose livelihoods depended on the systems we'd built together. "A year ago," I said, "this company went through a crisis. We lost access to critical systems. We couldn't process payroll. We couldn't serve clients. For 3 days, we were paralyzed." The room was quiet. That crisis happened because of a failure of planning, a failure of communication, a failure to recognize that operations aren't decorative, they're essential. I paused. But that crisis also taught us something important. It taught us that resilience isn't about avoiding failure. It's about how we respond when failure happens. I clicked to the next slide. This year, we rebuilt. We created better systems, better documentation, better training. We invested in redundancy and sustainability. We learned to value the foundation as much as the vision. Another slide. And the results speak for themselves. Operational efficiency up 30%, employee retention up 18%, client satisfaction at an all-time high. We didn't just recover, we improved. I looked at Lauren, sitting in the front row. She was smiling. "None of this happened by accident," I continued. "It happened because we chose to learn from crisis instead of being destroyed by it. Because we chose collaboration over ego. Because we chose to build something sustainable instead of something fragile." Final slide. That's my hope for this company going forward. That we keep building, that we keep learning, that we remember that strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about knowing how to repair what's broken. The room applauded. I stepped down from the podium and walked back to my seat. Lauren caught my eye and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded. That night, I went to the cemetery. I hadn't been since Dad's funeral, couldn't face it somehow, but tonight felt right. His headstone was simple. Just his name, his dates, and a single line. He built foundations. I sat on the grass beside it and pulled my knees up. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. "I hope you're not too disappointed." The wind moved through the trees. Things got complicated. Lauren and we struggled, we hurt each other. I almost walked away from everything you built. I picked at the grass. But we figured it out, kind of. We're learning to work together again, to trust each other. It's not perfect. It might never be perfect. But it's honest. A bird called somewhere in the distance. "I think I understand now what you meant. About balance. It's not just about her vision and my foundation. It's about respecting both." About neither of us trying to do everything alone. I stood up slowly. I'm going to keep building, Dad. The company, the systems, the team, but also myself, my boundaries, my value, the parts of me that exist separately from the work. I touched the headstone. I hope that makes you proud. I walked back to my car as the sun set. The air was cool, clean, the kind of evening that feels like a threshold between what was and what will be. I didn't know what the future held, whether Lauren and I would maintain this fragile peace, whether the company would thrive or struggle, whether I'd stay for years or eventually move on. But I knew I had choices, real choices, not because I'd made myself indispensable, but because I'd learned to value myself independent of anyone else's estimation. That was the difference Lauren had learned, and maybe, finally, the difference I'd learned too. 2 years after my firing, I got a call from a headhunter. Claire Donovan, the woman said. My name is Rachel Torres. I specialize in executive placement for mid-sized companies. Your name came up in connection with a director of operations position at a company in Seattle. Would you be interested in hearing about it? I was in my office reviewing quarterly projections. I'm not looking for a new position. I understand, but this is a unique opportunity. Series B funded, strong leadership team, operational framework that needs building from the ground up. It's exactly the kind of challenge you excel at. Who recommended me? I can't disclose that, but they spoke very highly of your work at Donovan Industries. They said you were one of the best operational minds in the industry. I should have said no immediately. I wasn't looking. I had a contract. I'd just spent 2 years rebuilding trust with my sister and stabilizing the company, but I heard myself say, "Tell me more." We talked for 20 minutes. The opportunity was compelling. A clean slate. A chance to build systems from scratch without navigating existing politics or family complications. Good compensation, strong equity package, autonomy. I'll send you the full brief, Rachel said. No pressure, just take a look. After we hung up, I sat with the strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't excitement exactly, more like possibility, the idea that I could leave, that I had options, that Donovan Industries wasn't the only place that valued my skills. I didn't mention the call to Lauren, not yet, maybe not ever, but I kept the brief, read it, thought about it. Having the option mattered. Lauren and I had coffee one morning a few weeks later. We'd gotten into the habit of weekly check-ins, informal conversations over coffee where we could talk about strategy without the pressure of formal meetings. You've been quiet lately, she said. Everything okay? Fine, just thinking. About? I considered telling her about the Seattle opportunity, about the headhunter's call, about the fact that I was keeping my options open. Instead, I said, about legacy, what we're building here, whether it'll last. You're not planning to leave, are you? Her voice was careful. Not right now. But eventually. Maybe, someday, I don't know. I looked at her. Does that scare you? Yes. Good, she blinked. Good? Good that you recognize I'm not permanent. That I'm here by choice, not obligation. That means you have to keep earning my choice. That sounds exhausting. Welcome to relationships. I smiled slightly. You don't get to take people for granted and expect them to stay. Lauren was quiet for a moment. You've changed. So have you. Is that a good thing? I think so. We're more honest now, less afraid. I'm still afraid sometimes, she admitted, of screwing this up again, of losing you. Then don't screw it up. What if I do accidentally? Then we'll deal with it. But Lauren, you need to understand something. I'm not going to light myself on fire to keep this company warm. Not anymore. If it ever comes down to choosing between this job and my own well-being, I'm choosing me. I wouldn't want you to do anything else. You sure? Because 2 years ago, I know what I did 2 years ago. I regret it every day. She met my eyes. You were right to walk away. You were right to demand better. It was the wake-up call I needed. I wasn't trying to teach you a lesson. I know. You were trying to survive, but I learned anyway. We finished our coffee and went back to work. That evening, I called Rachel Torres. I'm not taking the Seattle position, I said, but I appreciate the consideration, and Rachel, keep me on your list for future opportunities. Absolutely. Can I ask what made you stay? I thought about it. Unfinished business, relationships worth maintaining, a sense that I'm building something meaningful. But you're keeping your options open, always. After we hung up, I felt lighter. The Seattle job had served its purpose. It reminded me that I had agency, that staying at Donovan Industries was a choice, not a trap. And as long as it remained a choice, I could keep choosing it. 3 years after my firing, we held a memorial service for Dad. It had been his birthday. He would have been 68. Mom organized it, a small gathering at the house, family and close friends, sharing memories and stories. Lauren gave a speech about his business acumen, his vision, his ability to inspire people. It was good, polished, the kind of thing you'd expect from a CEO. When she finished, people looked at me expectantly. I wasn't prepared, hadn't planned anything, but I stood up anyway. My dad taught me about foundations, I said. Not the sexy stuff, not vision or strategy or leadership. The unglamorous work of making sure things actually function, paying attention to details, building systems that last. I paused. He also taught me about dignity, about knowing your worth and not accepting less than you deserve, about walking away when necessary, and coming back when it's right. I looked at Lauren. I think he'd be proud of us. Not because we avoided conflict, but because we worked through it. Not because we never failed, but because we learned from failure. Mom was crying quietly. The company he built is still standing, I continued, not because it's perfect, but because it's resilient, because we made it resilient. Together, I sat down, people were quiet. Later, after everyone had left, Lauren and I cleaned up the kitchen while Mom rested. That was a good speech, Lauren said. Yours was better. Mine was more polished. Yours was more true. We washed dishes in comfortable silence. Do you think he'd really be proud? Lauren asked. After everything that happened? Yes. How can you be sure? Because he loved us, both of us, and love means believing people can grow, can change, and can be better than their worst moments. Lauren handed me a dish to dry. I'm glad you came back. Me too. Even though I was awful to you? You were, but you learned. That counts for something. Does it count enough? I thought about the question, about the 3 years since my firing, about the work we'd done to rebuild trust, about the systems we'd created, the team we'd developed, the company we'd stabilized. Yeah, I said, it counts enough. 4 years after my firing, I was offered a seat on the board. One of the original members was retiring, and Lauren proposed me as his replacement. The board voted unanimously in favor. This is a conflict of interest, I told Lauren. I can't be on the board and report to the CEO. Then we restructure. You report to the board, same as me. We're equals. That's not how corporate hierarchy works. Then we make it work differently, she smiled. Dad gave us both stakes in this company. We should both have equal say in how it's run. It took 3 months to restructure the governance model. Legal consultations, bylaw amendments, shareholder communications. But we did it. 5 years after being fired, I became co-executive of Donovan Industries alongside my sister, not co-CEO. We maintained separate roles, but equal authority, equal voice, equal accountability. The press release was simple. Donovan Industries announces leadership evolution, elevating Claire Donovan to co-executive role alongside CEO Lauren Donovan. The restructuring reflects the company's commitment to balanced leadership and operational excellence. I read it 3 times, looking for the trap. There's no trap, Lauren said. She was standing in my office doorway. This is real. Why now? Because you've earned it. Because the company's better with both of us at the top. Because Dad was right about balance. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The sister who'd fired me 5 years ago was gone, replaced by someone more complicated, more humble, more real. Okay, I said, let's do it. The night before the announcement went public, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that day 5 years ago, standing in my office, packing my things, Lauren in the doorway, smile small and satisfied, telling me my services weren't required. I remembered the weight of that moment, the humiliation, the betrayal, the careful blankness I'd wrapped around myself to survive it. And I remembered the decision I'd made, to walk away, to demand better, to refuse to be disposable. That decision had changed everything, not because it was revenge, not because it punished Lauren, but because it forced both of us to confront something essential, that relationships require respect, that power without accountability is destructive, that we were better together than apart, but only if together meant genuine partnership, not hierarchy disguised as family. The next morning, the announcement went live. My phone exploded with messages. Congratulations, questions, interview requests, a few skeptics wondering if it was just a PR move, if real power would actually be shared. Time would tell, but I knew something they didn't. I knew that the last 5 years had been a long, complicated negotiation about value and boundaries, and what it meant to work with someone you loved when that love had been tested and broken and carefully rebuilt. I knew that Lauren and I would disagree, that we'd argue, that there would be moments when the old patterns tried to reassert themselves, but I also knew we'd built something resilient enough to withstand it. Because resilience wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about knowing how to repair what broke. 6 months into our co-executive structure, we had our first major disagreement. Lauren wanted to acquire a competitor. I thought it was premature, that we hadn't stabilized our own operations enough to absorb another company. We argued for 2 weeks, emails, meetings, competing presentations to the board. It was uncomfortable, tense. A few times, I saw flashes of the old Lauren, the one who wanted to overrule, to assert authority, to win, but she caught herself, paused, asked questions instead of making declarations. And I did the same. Instead of digging in defensively, I listened to her reasoning, found the merit in her perspective, even as I maintained my concerns. Eventually, we found a compromise, a smaller acquisition, a longer timeline, a pilot integration that would test our capacity before full commitment. The board approved it. After the vote, Lauren found me in the hallway. That was hard, yeah. But we got to a better answer than either of us had alone. Yeah. Is this always going to be this hard? I smiled slightly. Probably. Okay, she nodded. I can live with that. 7 years after my firing, I stood in the cemetery again. It had become an annual tradition. Dad's birthday, quiet visit, update on the company and the family and how Lauren and I were doing. We're doing okay, Dad, I said. Better than okay, actually. The company's growing. We just opened a second office. Revenue's up 40% since you died. I sat down on the grass. Lauren and I are complicated. We always will be, but we're honest. We don't pretend things are perfect. We work through the hard stuff instead of avoiding it. The wind moved through the trees, the same way it always did. I think you'd like who we've become. We're not the same people you left behind. We're harder in some ways, but maybe wiser. I paused. I learned something these last 7 years, about power and worth and what it means to stand up for yourself. I learned that walking away isn't weakness, that boundaries aren't selfish, that being valued is more important than being needed. I stood up slowly. Lauren learned too. She learned that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing when to lean on people who fill your gaps, about treating people like partners instead of subordinates. I touched the headstone. We learned the difference, Dad. The difference between vision and foundation, between being needed and being valued, between family obligation and genuine partnership. I walked back to my car as the sun began to set. I didn't know what the next 7 years would bring, whether the company would continue to grow, whether Lauren and I would maintain this careful balance, whether I'd eventually move on to something else or stay until I retired. But I knew I was okay with not knowing, because I'd learned the most important lesson, that I could survive anything, walk away from anything, rebuild anything, not because I was invincible, but because I knew my worth, independent of anyone else's estimation. That was the difference, and it was enough. 10 years after my firing, Donovan Industries celebrated its 50th anniversary. We threw a party, big event, 300 people, catered dinner, speeches, awards. Lauren and I stood on stage together, looking out at a company that had survived and evolved and grown. 10 years ago, Lauren said into the microphone, I made the worst decision of my career. The room went quiet. I fired my sister, my co-founder, the person who'd been holding this company together through sheer competence and dedication. I did it because I was insecure, because I confused questions with challenges, because I thought leadership meant having all the answers. She looked at me. Claire taught me something important when she walked away. She taught me that people aren't disposable, that respect isn't optional, that if you want someone's best work, you have to value not just what they do, but who they are. She gestured for me to step forward. I took the microphone. I learned something too. I learned that boundaries matter, that walking away is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do, that your worth isn't determined by how much people need you, but by how much they value you. I paused. The last 10 years haven't been easy. Lauren and I have disagreed. We've argued. We've had to learn and relearn how to work together as equals instead of as hierarchy. But we did learn, and that learning made us better leaders, better partners, better sisters. The room applauded. After the speeches, after the dinner, after most people had gone home, Lauren and I sat alone in the empty ballroom. 10 years, she said. Feels like a lifetime. It kind of was. Do you ever regret coming back? I thought about it. No, but I don't regret leaving either. Both were necessary. I regret firing you. I know, you've said that approximately 1,000 times. She smiled. Worth repeating, we sat in comfortable silence. What do you think the next 10 years look like? Lauren asked. I don't know, more growth, more challenges, probably more disagreements. You think we'll make it? Yeah, I think we will. How can you be sure? Because we know how to repair what breaks now. That's the difference between surviving and thriving. Lauren nodded slowly. Dad would be proud. Yeah, I think he would. We left the ballroom together, turned off the lights, locked the doors. Tomorrow there would be more work. More decisions, more navigating the complicated space between vision and foundation, between family and business, between who we'd been and who we were becoming. But tonight we'd celebrated, acknowledged how far we'd come, honored both the breaking and the rebuilding. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything. I still have the nameplate from that day. Director of Operations. It sits on a shelf in my office now, next to the new one, Co-Executive, Donovan Industries. Sometimes I pick up the old one and remember the weight of it in my hand as I packed my box, the emptiness of that office, the satisfaction in my sister's smile. I remember thinking, in that moment, that I'd lost everything. I hadn't. I'd lost the illusion that I needed to accept being undervalued, that family obligation outweighed self-respect, that staying was always better than leaving. Those were good things to lose. What I found instead was harder won and more valuable. The knowledge that I could survive anything. The courage to set boundaries and enforce them. The understanding that real partnership requires mutual respect, not just mutual need. I found my own worth, independent of anyone else's estimation. And when I came back, when I chose to come back, I came back different, stronger, clearer about what I would and wouldn't accept. That made all the difference. Not just for me, for Lauren too, for the company, for everyone who depended on us to get this right. The difference between being fired and being valued. The difference between being needed and being respected. The difference between family obligation and genuine partnership. My sister learned that difference the hard way, but she learned it. And in learning it, we both became something better than we'd been before. That morning, the morning after she fired me, when she walked into the office expecting everything to work and found it locked, she learned what I'd known all along, that foundations matter, that operations aren't decorative, that the quiet work of making things function is just as essential as the visible work of making decisions. But more than that, she learned something about relationships, about what happens when you treat people as disposable, about the consequences of valuing vision over the people who make vision possible. She learned the difference, and I learned something too. I learned that I was strong enough to walk away, valuable enough to demand better, essential enough to be worth fighting for. I learned that my worth existed independent of her recognition. That was the difference that changed everything.